Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. Welcome to Habib Talks, an initiative by Habib University dedicated to curating conversations of profound significance centered around crucial developmental, economic, political, and humanitarian crises impacting the world and its implications on Pakistan. Today's episode holds particular significance as this is yet another global addition to our Habib Talks series, with this podcast being recorded in the UK for the very first time. I am your host Shaheera Pesnani, and I have the honor and privilege of being the first alumni to host an episode of Habib Talks. In today's conversation, we will set sail across the Indian Ocean and dig deeper into all things past and heritage, which will aid our understanding about Islamic archaeology, material culture, and will hopefully help us to contextualize Pakistan across Indian Ocean region. In conversation with me today is Professor Pradines. Professor Stephane Pradines is an archaeologist and professor of Islamic art and architecture at the Aga Khan University Institute for the Study of Muslim Civilizations in London. He was the director of the excavations of the walls of Cairo, Egypt, and many other across the Indian Ocean region and East Africa. He is a specialist of Islamic archaeology in sub-Saharan Africa, Indian Ocean medieval trade, and Muslim material culture. Professor Pradines is the founding editor of the Journal of Material Culture in the Muslim World, an academic journal with full open access published by Brill in partnership with the Aga Khan University and the Aga Khan Museum. His last book in press is entitled Indian Ocean Cultures, which is edited with Dr. Farooq Topan. Thank you so much, Professor Stephane Pradines, for taking out the time to have this conversation with me today. It's such a delight to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you very much.
So let's start off this conversation with something very foundational. Given that you're an archaeologist and you specialize in Islamic archaeology, I just wanted to understand and sort of dig deeper into archaeology as a field and how it is still relevant in today's world.
Thank you for this. It's a very tricky question because Islamic archaeology is a specific, discipline and field, and it's all about archaeology, but also Islamic or Muslim cultures. So basically, when you work on Islamic archaeology, you work on the medieval past of Eastern civilizations, Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, of course including Pakistan. But it's also a very contested, definition. A lot of people discuss, the definition of Islamic architecture, Islamic art, and we have the same discussion around Islamic archaeology. So basically, what is Islamic archaeology? It's all about medieval and modern societies in the Muslim world. So of course, Pakistan is part of the Muslim world, and there is much to do, of course, in the archaeology of Asia. Then about why it's relevant to the modern day, to our contemporary world, it's the fact that archaeology brings a debate and questions about the past and the present. When you work on the archaeology of Pakistan, you can question, the role of the Sindh, the relationship between the Sindh and Gujarat, or Balochistan and Iran. When you work in archaeology, you are also working in heritage, conservation, preservation of historical sites. And so basically, archaeology is history, it's heritage, and you don't have a nation or people without past. So archaeology is not important only for archaeologists, but also for people, museums, and public.
Thank you so much for that. You answered my next question as well, which was about what is Islamic archaeology, because we've heard about the terms Islamic architecture, Islamic art, but Islamic archaeology, I don't think many of our viewers would have heard this term before. And at Habib as well, we used to question everything from a very critical lens. What is Islamic about Islamic architecture, or what is Islamic about Islamic archaeology? So your definition really helps me, and I'm sure it would help the viewers understand as well about what Islamic archaeology really entails. And thank you for bringing in the archaeological richness of Pakistan as well, because even though Pakistan has a few archaeological sites, but I don't think many of us actually venture out to those archaeological sites, and it's not really of something of interest or of a tourist destination, right? So just talking about Pakistan, I believe you've done some excavation in Pakistan as well, in Lahore and in Stephane Sharif. So I was wondering if you could just shed some light about your experience of doing some archaeological excavations in Pakistan, what's the current state, how things can be improved, and how can archaeology can contribute to a society like Pakistan?
I think that Islamic archaeology is very often forgotten. Why? Because in countries with a rich past, such as Pakistan, but I'm thinking also about Egypt, people are focusing on great civilizations of the past. In Egypt, you know, with the pharaohs and the pyramids. In Pakistan, with Mohenjo-daro. And so they forget that a huge part of their past is also the Islamic medieval period. And so, of course, my interest is to study the Islamic and medieval period. My relationship with Pakistan is a very old relationship. When I was a PhD student in 1998, I was working with Pakistani antiquities and Monique Kervan in Stephane Sharif. So this site was founded by Alexander the Great, and it was a very important site, you know, during the medieval and Mughal period. So it was my first experience. And more recently, I worked with the Aga Khan Trust for Culture on the project in Lahore Fort. We are also looking for old levels, you know, like maybe the Ras Navid in Lahore, and maybe even Indus Valley civilizations, you know, in Lahore. So I am enjoying working in Pakistan, and I haven't seen any difficulties right now working in Pakistan. Some colleagues are, from time to time, afraid to establish archaeological mission in Pakistan. They are talking about security, but actually I never saw in the past, like in Stephane Sharif or today in Lahore, any problem with security.
Yeah, that's really refreshing to hear, and the fact that there are active archaeological sites in Pakistan is really interesting. So I just wanted to ask, just going back to the topic of excavations, have you unearthed something right now in Lahore while excavating as yet, or is it still under process? Or while you were excavating in Stephane Sharif, do you have a favorite object or anything of that sort?
I remember when I was in Stephane, the director of the mission asked me to work on the fortifications because it's one of my main interests. It's all about Muslim warfare, fortifications. So it was a great gift. I had the opportunity to work on the fortification of Stephane Sharif, the old site of Stephane, not the modern city with the mausoleum. And I was lucky because behind the walls, the Mughal walls, I found one of the first gates of Stephane Sharif from the Sasanian period, so from the 4th-5th century AD. So I was very lucky. What we are doing is we are supporting the conservation project. So it's more like kind of what we call in Europe salvage or rescue excavations. We are digging areas that under conservation process, and so we didn't do any great discovery. Maybe the first year when we work with the Lahore Fort City Authority, we work on a hammam from the time of the Emperor Akbar. So to excavate an hammam from the great Mughal Emperor Akbar, for me it was a dream, it was a privilege.
Wow. It all sounds so fascinating. I just want to bring this to your wider research on the Indian Ocean region, because a lot of people are aware in Pakistan about our Mughal history, the history of how Muhammad bin Qasim came. So if you could just talk a little bit more about your own research and the Indian Ocean region, and then we can talk about how does Pakistan come into play within the wider Indian Ocean region.
Sure. In fact, what is very interesting with Pakistan is that Pakistan is or was forgotten from the Indian Ocean history or world history. And when people think or talk about Pakistan, they think mainly two periods: Bronze Age with Indus civilizations, Mohenjo-daro and so on, or Mughal era. Of course, very few people focus, for example, on the Talpur and other, great dynasties, not only of the Sindh but also of Pakistan. So about the Indian Ocean region, it's a program that we have at the Aga Khan University. We have this research program on the Indian Ocean. By Indian Ocean, what we mean? We mean all the countries, and we are focusing on Muslim cultures. We are working on all the countries, Muslim countries, connected with the Indian Ocean. So by Muslim countries, I mean all Eastern Africa, the Swahili coast, Kenya, Tanzania, Somalia, for example, Comoros also, and the Arabian Peninsula, so mainly Yemen and Oman, the Red Sea up to Egypt, but also the Gulf, so with Iran, Bahrain, Qatar, Oman, all the Emirates, of course Pakistan, the coast of India, Sri Lanka, Maldives, and all Southeast Asia, because from time to time people forget that we have Muslims and Muslim civilization in Southeast Asia, so up to Indonesia, Malaysia, and all the up to the way to China.
Right. And do you want to expand more about your research on the fortifications and, material culture that you've excavated or found on the Swahili coast?
Yes, thank you. For the Swahili coast, I worked for more than 20 years on Swahili sites, medieval sites in Kenya, Tanzania, and Comoros mainly. And it's a little bit what I did in East Africa that I would like to do in Pakistan. So basically to expose, to excavate, to promote medieval archaeological site in Pakistan. Not only medieval, but also modern, because when we talk about Mughal era, it's 16 to 18th, 19th century, if we include the Talpur. So I would like really to explore this period. So to expose Pakistan not as a periphery, but as a central country. And when people talk about the Mughals, immediately we think about India. So I would like to put back Pakistan, in the middle of the play. I know that it might be a bit ambitious, but and the fortresses is the same. I'm working in Lahore. The Sindh is full of castles and fortresses. Not only to mention Banbhore, the old Debol, we call Banbhore today. I mean, these kind of sites need to be explored. There is much more to do in Pakistan.
You're absolutely right in saying that there's so much more to do. And because of my own fellowship on the Indian Ocean Exchanges program with the Getty Foundation, I got a chance to visit Qatar, Kenya, Singapore. And there what was so interesting for me and what stood out was the fact that how these countries are really trying their best to retrace the Indian Ocean connection. But in Pakistan, I feel like we have turned our back. I feel like we have sort of forgotten and erased our history and how the richness of the Indian Ocean connections and network and what they have brought to nowadays Pakistan. On the same thread, we see that happening in a different way through Belt and Road Initiative, through CPEC, interestingly. So I guess my question to you is, how do we really reimagine and recontextualize Pakistan in a very Indian Ocean lens? How can we achieve that? What are the challenges and opportunities there when we think about Pakistan as an Indian Ocean country?
There's, I think, a lot of opportunities for Pakistan in terms of culture, heritage, and also archaeology, because, as you said, most of the time or in the past, people focus on the continental aspect of Pakistan. So basically, the Indus River. With Harappa, we can go up to, I mentioned Mohenjo-Daro, but we can go up to Harappa. And also the Central Asian connection of Pakistan. So basically the Punjab, Indian Punjab and Pakistani Punjab, and also Kabul was at once capital of the Mughal. And people, they think about northern Pakistan, Central Asia, the Silk Roads. And yes, this Indian Ocean aspect was forgotten. And so I think it's also a way to do a balance. Because when you do archaeology or when you work on history and heritage, politics is not too far. And of course, it's always difficult, to navigate. But it's also very important for people to know about their past. And so Pakistan needs probably to look at these Indian Ocean windows. And as you rightly said, it is done in the Gulf with all the Emirates, Qatar, and so on. And it should be done in Pakistan, especially with economic initiative, because I was talking about politics, economic initiative with the belt, with the Chinese connection from land, but the sea shouldn't be forgotten. So I think a lot of projects should turn around the sea. And of course, Karachi, as one of the main cities of Pakistan, should play a central role in the development of archaeological research, but also social, sciences and social humanities in the region.
I understand how economic cooperations like CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, under the flagship Belt and Road Initiative, can be a way to understand more about Pakistan's Indian Ocean past. But similarly, especially in my own research on Gwadar and my experience of being in Kenya and Tanzania, it can also be a very difficult way to achieve that, because in a way there's so much development happening, right? In the case of Gwadar, if I talk about the East Bay Expressway, there's so much urbanization and development happening. Then how do you reach that fine balance between economic development, urban development, and then at the same time preserving our archaeological roots or heritage?
Well, I don't want to be cynical or pessimistic, but in a way you can't. But we have always to adapt, ourselves to make sure that we can also respond, to the demands of the partners, like the companies or NGO, but also the local authorities. And so we need, when we are archaeologists or architects or heritage architects, to think about the local community, the people. So what we can do for the people to make sure that we can have a balance between sites and economic development. And it's very difficult, but I think it's what I was working with the World Monument Fund and the Aga Khan Trust for Culture, and I think it's what we did successfully, is to provide job to the people and to protect monuments at the same time. We talk about development and economy. There is another problem. It's ecology. And the Sindh and Pakistan had some very dramatic issues recently with all the flood. When you look at the Sindh Delta and the Indus River, a lot of heritage sites, because it's dramatic for people, it's dramatic for heritage sites. So I would like to work on one or two sites who are at risk because of the global warming, because of the sea rising. So these are a little bit the things that I have in mind. It's also to protect Pakistani sites who might be in danger in the next few years or who are already in danger because of the global warming.
Yeah, absolutely. Pakistan is very vulnerable to the effects of climate change, and the floods in 2022 proved to be a disaster for Pakistan's heritage sites. We saw the damage it did to World Heritage sites such as Mohenjo-daro and Makli. There might be a lot of more sites that we don't know about and would already be suffering from the dramatic, impacts of temperatures in Pakistan. How can we really go about creating that awareness within the public, within academics and scholars, and also the Pakistani state as well, in terms of climate change and how we can direct more resources or do some work on that?
Well, this is a very difficult question, because I think that it will involve also the government. For example, when people are building a road, okay, is this road will cut maybe a natural river or a flood or an estuary of the Sindh Delta? Do we have some silting problems? There is a lot of questions, around development. I forgot the name in the Sindh, where I could see that part of the site was destroyed, by farmers. When I'm thinking about, of course, destruction, because of the global warming, I'm also thinking about this kind of destruction. In the Sindh Delta, I saw the same in the Nile Delta. So it's probably a combo deal to do with local communities, but also with the government, because most of these sites are known. When they are not known, it's another story, but when they are known, the boundaries should be well protected by the antiquities. So it's also, as you said, awareness with the local community to say, look, if you use this part of land which is normally protected by the Pakistani government, you will maybe destroy some opportunities in the future for your children, because this site won't be open to the public and it won't drag, people. So it's a problematic, because it will be solved maybe by NGO, by Pakistani government, and by other organizations, of course. It's all about sustainability. So basically, we need to look at the long term.
I asked this question before as well about your favorite object, and I just wanted to ask again about what kind of objects have you found in your excavations right now. I think it would be really interesting for the audience to know the kind of things that we have buried underneath our feet that we normally wouldn't think about.
Well, it's so difficult because I excavated in many countries. I like ceramics. People think that when you do archaeology, you are digging to find Gold is something very important to the people. I remember when I was in Cairo, we found one Fatimid dinar, this gold coin. So people were excited, Egyptian antiquities were excited. It was nice to find gold because gold, doesn't age, so gold is shining. Even after 1,000 years, gold is gold. But to me, I think I was more excited to find in Egypt like some Fatimid brush or combs, in wood from the Fatimid period, or Mamluk, ropes. We found even a piece of Mamluk manuscript, so paper from the 14th century. So I think I have more emotion when I find these kind of objects who are not very valuable, but they are unique in a way, because I bring. So when I was visiting Banbhore, I saw a lot of ceramics in Banbhore, in the museum, that I found in my excavations in Comoros, in Africa, or in Kenya, or in Tanzania. So these objects are fantastic because they show you the connection between Pakistan, Iran, and East Africa.
It's just so interesting how it's not just the archaeological objects that tell you about the connections that we have had with the wider region, but also in terms of objects that we use in our everyday life, such as doors or the carved niches or buttresses. There's been so much influences in terms of our culture, in terms of our languages, in terms of our history as well. The fact that you're an archaeologist, I just wanted to delve more into it. What really brought you to archaeology, and given that archaeology can be considered as a liberal arts and humanities subject, what has your experience been of studying a liberal arts?
Since I was a kid, I wanted to dig. I was digging in the garden of my grandfather, my late grandfather. Of course, he was desperate to see this little kid, digging everywhere. I did my studies in the Sorbonne in Paris. And at the beginning, I did African archaeology, and then I moved to Islamic archaeology, Egypt, East Africa, and so on, and now Asia and with Pakistan. But social archaeology is part of social sciences, so it's very close to history. I think that we can do much more in terms of archaeology and Islamic archaeology in particular. In Karachi, so basically we give work opportunities for the students. So they join as volunteers, but they learn what to do, what is to be an archaeologist. And then they discover that archaeology is not monolithic.
Yeah, it's so interesting because when I joined the heritage sector as well, I just thought that one can only be a heritage consultant. But since I've been working with Historic England in the UK, a government organization that specializes in historic environment, I've come to realize there's so many other job opportunities within the sector itself, right? I think that really opens up your worldview about how different occupations, or if you study subjects like archaeology or sociology, how it can really shape and widen your horizon and broaden your understanding of today's world.
We have job opportunities. Of course, they have to be flexible. It's all about mobility. I'm French, I'm working in London. I have colleagues, they are British, they are working in Paris. We have to move where the job opportunities are.
To conclude, I must ask, what do you see is the importance of having these conversations on an international platform?
I'm very grateful to Habib University for having this possibility to talk about Indian Ocean cultures, heritage project in Pakistan. So we talk a lot about the Sindh, but Lahore, of course, is one of the most historic cities, of Pakistan. So for me, yes, I'm very grateful to Habib University and to you for this opportunity to talk about what we can do in the future.
Thank you so much, Professor Pradines, for taking out the time to have this interesting conversation with me. I know I was really excited to talk about the Indian Ocean with you because of my own research interest, and it's been such a delight to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Shaheera. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Habib Talks. We hope you enjoyed this conversation with Professor Stephane Pradines, and hopefully this would have given you a different perspective in understanding past and heritage, but also about Pakistan's history. Don't forget to tell us about your favorite parts from this episode in the comment section below, and feel free to share this episode with your friends and family. Hopefully, we'll be back again with another exciting and engaging episode of Habib Talks in the UK.